Oh, that's okay. So I'm Tim Maciag. I'm from the University of Regina in the Faculty of Engineering and Applied Science in the Software Systems Engineering program.
And I'm Candace Giblett, one of Public Education Officer of Regina Fire and Protective Services.
I just want to confirm that you're seeing the screen before we get going. Just the slides.
Yes,
Okay.
we are.
Perfect, thank you. All right, Candace, it's all you.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So I'll just tell you when it's time to flip the slide. Hey, Tim?
Yeah.
I wanted to start my timer because I'm so bad at going. I talk so much, you guys. I'd be talking your ear off. So I wasn't sure where everybody was coming from for the presentation, where everybody was living, what organizations you're familiar with. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background of Regina Fire and Protective Services because I'm never sure how much people really know about the services that we provide here in Regina, Saskatchewan. So our city, we're looking upwards around 300,000 people now, and Regina Fire and Protective Services really responds to a comprehensive group of emergencies and then beyond emergencies. So the first slide that you're seeing is a pretty typical example of what people think of when they think of the fire department in their community and the responses that they have. So of course we respond to fires in our community, and all the pictures that you're seeing on the presentation here are from our local services. Here in Regina, our firefighters also are primary care paramedics, so they respond to medical emergencies. Another common emergency call that we receive is, of course, vehicular accidents. Our department is the service for the community that has the tools that are, I think, most well known as the jaws of life. So they use those tools to stabilize the vehicles and literally cut the vehicle apart so that they can get the patient out and transfer them to TMS and off to the hospital. One of the other pictures that you see in this particular slide is another group of professionals that we have working for us. Ones that are near and dear to my heart are the fire investigators. So they're literally like our CSI team, and they go out after a fire has been extinguished, and it's their job and it's a legal requirement for them to try to determine the cause and origin of the fire. And that information is critical for those of us in public education, as you'll see moving forward. So the next slide. Thanks, Tim. Oop, lost it. There we go. So the next slide shows some services that are not as well known. So our firefighters are also trained and respond to water rescue emergencies. So our department has, one of the fire stations has boats to respond if there's an emergency in our bodies of water. We also have a hazardous materials team. So anytime that there's a spill or a leak of some sort of chemical or substance that would bring harm to the community, it's our department's responsibility to go out and ensure the protection of both the environment and the people that live here. We also have a technical rescue team, and they respond to emergencies where people might be stuck high on a building or in a trench or a collapse of a building. So they have special skills in rappelling and using ropes and those types of things to rescue people. So that's three more services, and we'll move on to the next slide. And the service that we provide to our community that's the most dear to our heart, my heart anyway, is public education. So it's my job in the department.
C'est mon travail dans le département.
Sorry. Sorry, I couldn't figure that out. It's my job to ensure that the community is protected from fire by using the data and the education that's available to me to ensure that people can prevent fire from happening in their home, and then alternatively, if there is a fire, that they can escape and that no lives are lost. So we have a full gamut of programs that we provide to offer those services to the students. And we do public education with all ages, but the program that we're going to talk about today specifically was designed for young children in our community. So the next slide, I'll show you why we do this. So here in Regina, this is a map of our city. Every one of those blue dots represents a structure fire that we had in that one calendar year. So we had almost 230 structure fires for that year. And if we go to the next slide. On this slide, you will see the remnants or the remains of a home. In January 6, 2015, this home was taken by fire. And this fire happened in one of our older neighborhoods, lower income neighborhoods. And this was the last fire in our city where we had a child fatality. So 2015, we lost one of our youngest members of our community to fire. And as a public education officer working for the fire department, that is a failure on me, because it's my role to educate families and children so that those fatalities don't happen. So moving forward to the next slide, how we prevent that kind of things from happening. I would like to tell you the story of this fire, which happened more recently, 2018. On this evening, a fire started in this apartment building in the kitchen, as many fires do. In the residence, there was a mother and her 9-year-old daughter. The mother was sleeping when the fire started. The daughter was alerted first to the fire, and she quickly aroused her mother and, very implicitly expressed to her that they needed to get out. They needed to get out of the home. The mom would not leave. So the daughter grabbed her dog and she left the apartment and she went to the neighbors and she called 911 and she initiated the rescue. Her mother, as you can see, hopefully on one of the pictures, was forced out onto the balcony because the apartment was completely engulfed in flames, and the firefighters rescued her from that balcony. She experienced extreme life-threatening injuries. She had 2nd and 3rd degree burns over most of her body and lung collapse. So luckily, after months in the hospital, however, she did survive her injuries. But the firefighters, they went to this young 9-year-old girl after the fire and they asked her, they said, you did exactly what we would want you to do. You got out of the fire, you initiated the 911 call, you kept yourself safe, you gave us the information to be able to rescue. So we would like to know, how did you know what to do?
Sorry, Ruben, I'm sorry. I don't think you're connected yet. I apologize. Candace, please continue.
So they asked the firefighter, I asked this 9-year-old girl, how did you know what to do? And she said to the firefighters, well, the firefighters were just at my school and they taught me what to do. So one of the programs that I'm very proud of in our community is our firefighters. I'm sorry, I get so emotional at these things, sorry. One of the programs that our firefighters lead in the community is they go to every elementary school in our city on a 3-year cycle, and they teach the children, as you'll see on this slide, they teach the children from kindergarten to grade 3 how to escape fire in their home. And it's a very interactive activity. They do it in a gym. They set up, little stations for the kids to go through, because kids really, they have different learning styles and we want to make sure that we get the information to them. And so they go through this program. There's a little bed. They hear the smoke alarm. They roll off the bed. They go to the door. The firefighters teach them to feel the door to make sure there's no heat. They crawl through a tunnel that is supposed to emulate kind of darkness and smoke. They learn to crawl low through smoke. They get to the end of the tunnel. They practice their stop, drop, and roll if there's fire on their clothing. They go to the family meeting place and they learn never to go back into a burning residence. And then the final learning station in that activity is the firefighters take the children through a lesson of how to call 911, how to make that call, and what to say to the dispatcher or the operator on the other line. And as I hope you can see on the picture, while this program is great, we did up till a couple of years ago, we were using landline telephones and a teleprompter to try to teach kids how to call 911. Now, I don't know about where you live, but in our community, there are very few people who have landline telephones anymore. And so when we were teaching this activity in the schools, what we were coming up against was the children didn't know what these things were. They didn't recognize them as a phone. They didn't recognize them with what they should be using them for. So the firefighters started to complain that they were spending more time teaching the children how to use a landline telephone than how to call 911. And then one of them had the brilliant sentence to me. They said, you know, we need something on cell phones. Maybe you could design an app. And I said, yeah, because I have a software engineering degree, so I'll just get right on that. But it was a good idea. We didn't have, as a department, we don't have the expertise, the skills, or the education to do that. But it was still a good idea. Luckily, I had worked with our University of Regina before with our community engagement unit and worked with a wonderful woman named Lynn Giblett, who is a savior, a hero in my books. She said that I told her about this problem and about the firefighters' idea. And she said, you know what? I think I know somebody who might be able to help you out. And that she made the connection to Professor Tim Maciag. And I'm gonna, I think, let Tim tell the rest of the story, because this is where my area of expertise ends.
All right, thank you, Candace, and thank you, Lynn. Actually, it was Lynn who contacted one of my faculty admins, Colleen Walsh, and then she connected me with Candace. And as I brought Candace in and listened to her story, I thought, you know, this is interesting. I thought to myself, can I use what Candace's narrative is here in any way as a basis for a class activity or a class project? And one of the classes in my portfolio is titled People-Centered Design. And People-Centered Design, actually computer engineering, software, hardware engineering, electronics engineering in general, in my opinion, is really all about supporting people first, guided by process, using technology, hopefully, to make people's lives better in some way. That's the trick. Now, people process aspect of this problem-solving activity or innovating should always really come first, and software engineers sometimes focus on the technology first, and that more than usual leads to solutions that don't really solve problems. If I were to do a round table here and say, give me a show of hands of how many people have used some piece of software that murdered your very soul, okay, that might be a little bit tad extreme, but you would likely all put your hands up. So noting of the people-centered designness of it all, noting, you know, we have to solve the right problems, we have to put people and process first, and noting that, you know, everything really works within systems, and systems have front stage activities. So what people who are interacting with technology see, they have backstage activities, what people interacting with the technology may not see. So the back end of a piece of software, or the support mechanisms that go behind supporting that piece of software. These technology processes really should be, in effect, invisible to people interacting with the technology. That's what we try to train here, at least in this class, this particular class. And, you know, the impacts and constraints can be wide-ranging as well. I like to use the example of healthcare, because I used to work in the healthcare IT sector here. You know, visiting a family physician is something we take all for granted here in Canada. In Saskatchewan, if you're lucky, modern doctors use technology tools to log visits so that you can take your patient record wherever you are within the province. These tools are called the eHealth Record Viewer or Sunrise Clinical Manager. My doctor still is living in the dinosaur age and using paper and file and folders, unfortunately. So that sort of prevents me, but he's close to retiring. Now, when you're visiting the doctor, if medication is required, they use a certain system to connect physicians with pharmacists to move that information along. If it's x-rays, it's another system to move that along. Immunizations, which we're all familiar with these days, they use another system. And for paying the doctors, they use another system. I was actually shocked before I worked in healthcare. I had no idea that doctors in our province are paid by the visit. I thought Canada was this amazing free healthcare system, and it is. But that sort of rattled my brain a little bit. But the general idea is that it takes a system. That's the most important thing. So noting as well, when you design and develop simpler, complex solutions, you typically can't do things right away. So there also needs to be taught and ingrained this focus on small and simple interventions. In Agile, which is a software engineering process that you might be familiar with, we question what is the minimum amount of work required to get people using the technology to help them solve the problems as quickly as possible. So what is the minimum amount of work required? And that sort of goes against our grain. It goes against the grain when you're learning something as a student. You always kind of want to do the maximum to get the maximum score. But in this situation, we're looking for those small and simple interventions. So this type of work, it really involves close interaction with customers. It involves this iterative and incremental collaboration, customers, designers, and developers, and everyone needs to be okay with that. So that's my spiel of the class. Take it sometime if you want. I thought, though, this was a perfect opportunity to provide my students with this project experience. Now, having access to a real customer to solve a real problem while learning about the people, process, technology aspect of it all. And then listening to Candace's stories, Candace is really mesmerizing because she's really passionate about what she does. There was a real need to evolve this activity that the fire department really didn't have the expertise to do so on their own. And when we investigated further, actually, neither did the city of Regina. So the city of Regina IT supports all of the IT within Regina Fire and Protective Services. They didn't have this expertise either. Actually, this I'll talk about later is their first mobile app, the city of Regina. But in talking with the city, they were very enthusiastic. The city IT department was very enthusiastic when they eventually found out what we were doing. Now, with part of this class, there were some initial constraints of the class itself. For this to work, I had to ask Candace to come on campus a whole bunch of times to provide feedback to students as they were designing and developing solutions to her problem. And this happened in January to April, this class of 2020. And we all know what happened in March of 2020, COVID hit. And that maybe could have impacted our work, but it was a constraint. But actually, we kind of got through it very well, I guess, in my opinion. Now, every software project starts with design. And in my class, students learn a process for people-centered design called the fast feedback cycle. And if you're familiar with design thinking, this is an evolution of that iteration of design thinking that was developed by Microsoft. It's one that I kind of like. I used out in industry. Now, after you find a target customer through observation and framings, you go into those stages to observe what that target customer is having problems with, to empathize with them, to try and find and frame the problem that comes to mind, and confirming that framing with the customer. And this is to help develop this deeper understanding of the problem or innovation, so that the designers, developers, and customers are sort of all starting to use the same terminology so that they can collaborate better. In the brainstorm phase, engineers draft several design ideas, confirming these directions with the customer. And in the build phase, the design is actually built. So with the fast feedback cycle, you can see that the customer plays a key role in all of this. And Candace, in this case, acted as one of the customer groups as part of the firefighter customer groups. And other customers that my students picked up on were, well, of course, the kids, but maybe it's the parents as well, and the firefighters themselves have their own kind of constraints and requirements too with all of this. And in my class, I believe there was just over 30 people in the class, and the math might be wrong now that I say this, but there was 8 teams of 3 to 4 students, and they explored this process with Candace to try and solve and provide a solution to Candace's issue that she described. Now, in the observe and frame stage, this is where engineers try to empathize with their customers, the stories that they're hearing, to formulate what the root of the problem is. You know, in an empathy map, we might be familiar with too, it's where we try to figure out what people, in this case, customers, are saying, doing, seeing, hearing, thinking, and feeling. And in my class, I try to promote an individual activity of empathy mapping. And when people go into teams, they share the results and do some pattern matching and hopefully similar things that they all agree that the root of the problem is percolate to the top. Now, to my delight, many student teams understood and picked up on the people-centered design approach of it all, the people focus. You know, the activity is really at its root about safety, education for the public, kids and parents, and that was provided to firefighters and families. And this education actually might lead to prevention of fire accidents and or fatalities. Now, the process focus, you know, the safety knowledge was based on experiences, knowledges firefighters gained while on the job. And there was also an educational process to it as well, where the firefighters went into schools to educate kids through the interactive activity. There was a lot to think about of this educational experience. And with a technology focus, it really pleased me that, you know, as students and teams were hearing Candace's narrative, the small and simple intervention kind of percolated to the top of engineering a simple mobile app, a 911 simulator for kids and parents to move this idea along. Now, the next phase is the brainstorm phase. And at this phase, I always try to encourage students to think big, even though the main goal is a small and simple intervention. Thinking about a bigger picture, you know, other ideas might percolate, and you might also be able to collect those ideas in a parking lot for the iteration of a thing like this. So thinking big, but also have that small and simple intervention of the 911 simulator. Some students came up with some other interesting ideas, like an interactive fire escape plan for families, or extended games for continuous learning opportunities for families and kids, like a choose your own adventure, what to do when encountering a closed door. You know, do you open it right away, or do you put your hand to test for heat? Candace, I think that's the right answer. Well, you could help me. And through this process, Candace was along for the ride and discussed these ideas with students, and we all collaborated to sign off on ideas to move into the build phase. Now, with the build phase, there was, as I said, 8 teams, so there was 8 different builds for this mobile application. Here was one that I thought was interesting. It focused on the simulation of practicing a 911 call, drawing an escape plan, having links to fire survival information on the web, so sort of curating interesting content, but also the same for fire safety info. This
Hi, Tim.
team, yes.
I don't mean to interrupt. Just wanted to let you know that there is about 2 minutes left to the end of the session.
Okay, I'll continue moving on here.
Thank you.
This team focused on finding the house, numbers for the house, and then of course the 911 simulation came up, and other teams also brought design creativity with them as well. So one team here, member on a team, developed this little Sparky the dog thing. So my class had ended, and there were a lot of these interesting proof of concepts, but Candace and I thought, well, what do we do now? And, you know, timing wise, this was perfect. I just happened to see an email from Lynn that the U of R had this funding opportunity, and we could use this funding opportunity to hire a student from the class. And yay, our application was successful. We were able to hire a student from my class, and my program and engineering software systems engineering donated a laptop for the project because we wanted to develop a mobile app in Mac and iOS and Android. The student initially worked from September 2020 to December 2020 and continued working a little bit in January 2021 to April 2021, where funding was provided by my faculty. So it was a joint collaboration, which was sort of interesting. We assembled the team. So quickly, Candace on the bottom left, Colin Ellis on the upper right, business analysis with the city of Regina, Jack Zhao on the upper left, superstar engineer, and myself in the middle trying to facilitate everything. Now, the design experience stayed the same, observation and framing stayed the same. Brainstorming, however, Jack looked at his project, but also all other projects. And if you noticed in the other slide where I showed some of the outputs of the outcomes of the class, having there was colors and iconography that didn't really resemble a mobile phone. So in a conversation to iterate and evolve this application, key was to mirror an iOS or an Android phone as much as possible, because kids and parents need to have the when they're using this, need to have that appearance that it's a real mobile phone, not a toy, to have some legitimacy with it all. And brainstorm and build. So what did we build with this? So here is a screenshot of the app. You can explore addresses and simulate a 911 call. The address features look like this, where it would educate kids on where to find the number of the house, but also the street. Another issue or iteration came up here as we tested this with the city was, what if you live in an apartment? So we didn't capture that in this iteration. So there's still work to do. Going back to the main screen and doing the 911 simulation comes up with the emergency online screen. And we wanted to highlight the emergency button here because some parents password protect their phones, don't want to share that password. But knowing that if anyone could click the emergency button, be taken to the emergency call screen and dial 911 and other emergency numbers. In the kids testing it, if they dialed incorrectly, they got this pop-up asking them to try again. If they were successful, they got this pop-up indicating a good job. And if interacting with a parent or a firefighter, by clicking the script button, they could open it up and have that conversation that they're going to have on the phone when they're dialing 911, to have that consistent education. And the app is live, which is awesome. There's still work to do. You could click on those links if you're sharing these slides. I don't know. You can see where the app is, but there is still work to do. Thinking about that small and simple intervention approach, we can explore that interactive family escape plan, which I think is interesting, and the linking of existing and new online learning resources or virtual or augmented reality of the actual educational experience where the firefighters go into the school. Do some VR with that might be interesting. So that could be another class, or maybe an experience for a student who wants to come get supervised by me. So just before we end, special thank you to Lynn Giblett and Colleen Walsh. Colleen Walsh, the faculty administrator who made the connections with Lynn and Candace and all that. It was awesome. Special thanks to you guys. Special thanks to Candace and Colin. I think it provided my students with an invaluable experience, one that they take with them going forward. And special thanks to Jack Zell, who actually made it all come alive and enabled us to get done what we did. Thank you.